What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In 2019, what has that been, like 4 years ago? We pulled this 96 Honda Civic EK Coupe off of the shelf at my shop. It was a car that had been there for like 4 or 5 years. This car has been around for about 10 years now. It's followed me around the shop. I had it at the other shop for a long time. And one day I decided, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of looking at this Civic. I'm gonna pull it off and I'm gonna sell it. I don't want to deal with it. Listed it for sale. Nobody wanted to buy it. Hey, I'll give you $1,000, whatever. Anyhow, this thing was in primer, had a ton of body work done to it. It had a fully built D16. It had so much potential. So I said, you know what? Instead of trying to sell this thing as it is, nobody cares. Nobody sees the potential that I see. Let me show them. Like, let's pull it off. Let's paint it. Let's put this thing on the dyno and see how much power it makes. With that little D series, we actually took it up to PFI speed. We dynoed it and it made right over 500 horsepower on pretty much the current setup that was in it the whole entire time. So we brought it back. We took it to the drag strip and the goal was to run a 10-second pass with it. Had a bunch of issues with the transmission, shifting it, all that other stuff. I said, you know what shifts really fast? K-Series. So K-Series make a lot of power. They have a lot of potential, and I am a absolute sucker for potential. One of the things about a K-Series Honda Civic on the street, on the track, is that it's hard for them to put that power down. So I said, you know what else would be cool? So we put a diff in this thing and made it all-wheel drive. So we put an RT4 wheel drive, basically a Wago van stock rear differential in this thing with a viscous coupler, using the Hub City Performance all-wheel drive diff mount and rear trailing arms. Now the car had basically a stock K20, a stock CRV transmission, and an all-wheel drive setup. And we went to the track, basically hit our 10-second pass pretty much right away. Shortly after that, we found the weak link of the engine, which is the rods, especially with the all-wheel drive. All of that torque coming into some little 4-cylinder rods, they just snap and just send right out of the front of the engine. The next goal was an 8-second pass. In order to do an 8-second pass, we needed an 850 certified cage. So what we ended up doing is we actually traded a paint job to Kyle from the Boosted Boys. He actually welded at 850 full chromoly cage in this thing, and I painted his MR2 for him. So the weak link is the rods, and instead of going fully built right away and doing pistons, rods, valve springs, retainers, cams, all the stuff, sleeves, I just decided let's throw some rods in a stock K24, and that is exactly what we did. So we put a set of like $350 Eagle H-beam rods in a 100% stock K24 A2, still stock CRV transmission, stock everything. We actually ran, I don't know, probably 10 passes at the track. I was at 28 pounds of boost. This thing was making well over 600 horsepower, tons of launches, absolutely no issues with the engine, until one day I dropped a valve, and the stock valve hitting the stock cast piston actually just turned it into kibbles and bits, and it sent that rod right out of the front of the engine. So what I'm getting at is this car has been through a lot of variations. In its current configuration, this is right after we blew up the stock engine with only rods. So this engine right here is a K24 A2. It has a fully built head. It has Skunk 2 cams, valve springs, retainers, valves, head gasket, head studs, stock sleeves with a welded in block guard. It has JE Ultra Series pistons and Wiseco boost line rods. And this engine has been in here for probably 3 years. It's done probably 50 or so passes at the strip and plenty of stuff on the street. Last time my buddy Rudnick was here in town, we actually shot a rod through the front of the engine.
Did it just blow up?
I think it just...
I think it just fucking threw rods everywhere.
And that wasn't due to any issue with it itself or the tuning. It was actually my fault. About a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, we were at the track and I 1-2-1'd it. So I basically shifted first gear, wide open throttle, second gear, wide open throttle, went to shift to third gear, again, wide open throttle, and instead of it going into third, it went into first. And the RPM went well over 12,000 and basically stretched a rod bolt. The rod completely disconnected from the rod cap and shot out of the front of the engine. And that is exactly what happened here. And we will inspect this thing a little bit more when we get it out on the ground. So in this video, we're actually gonna go ahead and pull this engine out, put it on the ground, tear it apart, see exactly what happened, show you guys what happened, talk about it, and then we're actually gonna show you what we're gonna do for another version of this thing, which should get us that 8-second pass. So let's get to work. Engine is out, and as you can tell by the front of this thing, it's not in great shape. The crazy thing is that everything else should be good, other than that rod and the block, right?
I thought the block would be fine.
I think, no, the block actually should be okay.
I feel like the block would be totally cool.
But look at this. The crazy thing is it actually destroyed the starter. It literally busted it in half like you just took a freaking hammer and just smashed it. I mean, that's a freaking heavy duty rod.
Yeah.
Them freaking Wiseco boost lines. And then take a look at this. This right here is the rod bolt, or one of the rod bolts that broke. And this was just hanging around, just literally sitting up on the radiator support like right here. Which is crazy. You could see that bolt broke. The bearing wasn't hot. The oil in it looked beautiful. Like there's nothing in the oil. The only thing is this freaking bolt, I think, stretched when we 1-2-1'd it, gave it the little rev. Like, I think if we would have like replaced the rod bolts after we 1-2-1'd it, but I would have never thought to do that. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Should we pull this thing apart and see how it looks in there? I mean, honestly, I want to pull it apart and see how everything looks. So the cool thing is, this is a Vane engine stand. One of the guys over there sent me this thing a couple years ago, and I've used it probably too many times to pull the engine in and out of here. But it's just so convenient because you hook up the engine stand to it, set the lift down, take a little bit of tension off the bolts, pull the bolts out, and it just drops down. So it's nice because you could kind of put the transmission, put the accessories on it, and it literally goes up in pretty much the perfect position, and it's like almost exactly level where it needs to be in the engine bay. Yeah, we're gonna pull the tranny off here, and then I guess take this engine apart and see if we can figure out what actually happened. Oil pan is off, windage tray, all that stuff came off. Obviously it broke the windage. Look at that, it damaged it. The rod cap is right there, look at that. It got like pinched. It's like there's like a rivet or something. Like, I don't even know. I don't even know if I'll be able to get this thing off the block.
Oh, yep.
Look at that.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? That's what it did.
That's wild.
That's some power right there. The crazy thing is rotating assembly still like rotates. Kind of part of the thing that I wanted to do was look at it. At this point, I could pull off the rods and pistons that are left over in there and see if they're good. So I'm gonna do that.
That's crazy, dude.
That's pretty serious, but I mean, look at that. Still like little, I mean, yeah, that, but it literally did that to it. You can't. The other three pistons and rods are out of the engine, and kind of giving them the inspection. I mean, everything seems good. Even like the bearings, there's a little bit of material that looks like it went through there. Who knows? You know, if we would have replaced all of the rod bolts after I, 1-2-1'd it, and this thing went to probably 12 to 20,000 RPMs, whatever it did. If we were to replace the rod bolts, looking at everything else in here, I don't think we would have had issues running this engine for a while longer. Obviously, we were making a lot of power. I was revving this thing to like 9,700 RPMs. It's a K24 stock sleeves. If you take a look, stock sleeves, the only thing we had was a tapped in block guard, and that's literally like $100, $100 and some dollar piece, and it just kind of holds the top of the cylinders together. That's pretty much it for this engine. Let's go look at the cylinder head real quick. The cylinder head actually looks in good shape. It looks like this is the piston that went up. Obviously, there was some sort of contact with the head. Actually, look right here. You can see there's a couple little spots where it kind of touched right there, and then on the valves. So probably what would have to happen is at least kind of get rid of that little burr there on the edge, and then probably lap in some new valves, because there was a little piston to valve contact right there. But overall, the head looks good, cams and everything looks good. Doesn't look like any like material or anything went up to the top, because pretty much the engine ended up kind of locking up, turned off, shut off, and everything happened so fast, everything stopped pretty quick. So cylinder head should be good. We're gonna put those cams, because those are Skunk 2 Tuner 2 cams, in the new cylinder head. So speaking of the cylinder head, we actually picked up a fully built K24 engine that was sleeved and fully assembled, ready to go off of Facebook Marketplace. As soon as we blew up the engine with Rudnick that day, like the first thing I did was get on the internet and was like, sleeved K24. A couple days later on Marketplace, this engine popped up from a seller, and it was a guy who got it from a guy who got it from a guy who built it like 4 or 5 years ago that was gonna put it in a car. And essentially it was sitting around. Since it was sitting around, they couldn't give us any like clearances, any real specs. All he knew is he had a couple pictures of it getting assembled, and he knew that it was a built engine. I got a pretty good deal on this whole setup, but I didn't want to take a chance. Obviously, you know, we could have just threw it in the car and like hoped for the best, or we could say, hey, you know, let's pull the cylinder head off of this thing. Let's pull the pistons and rods out of here. Let's inspect stuff. Let's send it to the machine shop. And that is exactly what we did. So as you can see, the block looks a little bit beefier than the last one. And that is because these are actually aftermarket sleeves, a full cylinder sleeve replacement. And these are LA sleeves. So these are some big dogs. As you can tell, see how thick that boy is up on the top? But literally that's how thick the cylinder wall is right there. Should be able to handle plenty of power. And honestly, on the last setup, like I felt like I was really pushing it. Like, because we were probably getting close to 1,000 on stock sleeves with the block guard. The block is good. It's a K20A1 block, which means that it was like a CRV, and that means that they don't have oil squirters, which means that you have higher oil pressure. So right here in my hand, we have a set of Aries pistons, and I believe these are powder rods. So these are actually a pretty heavy duty setup. And one of the things that was about this engine when we pulled it apart, sent it to the machine shop, is it was actually machined pretty tight. So with a set of aftermarket forged pistons, basically you need to kind of do a little calculation to say, okay, what is my piston to wall clearance? And essentially this engine, even though it was like 1,000 horsepower capable build, the tolerances were set up for closer to like a 500 horsepower street build. Basically means that the cylinders were a little bit tighter than they should have been for what we're trying to do, which is hopefully make a bit over 1,000 horsepower. So the machine shop basically just rebored it real quick, just a little tiny bit, and now we're within spec. Moving over to the cylinder head, this is a ported, I believe it's a CRV cylinder head, but the intake and exhaust has been ported. It has valve springs, retainers, aftermarket valves, all that stuff done to it. And then right here on the little rocker assembly, you could actually see that it has the VTEC. This is kind of a budget VTEC killer. Instead of it having 3 lobes right here that ride on that and basically having an oil controlled lock bar that makes it run on the VTEC when you hit to, let's say, 5,000 or 6,000 RPMs. This thing is in VTEC all the time. And with the aftermarket camshafts that we're gonna be putting in this cylinder head, this thing is gonna sound super rowdy. Like it's gonna be one of those cars where you start it and it's like, bah, 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 and it's just like crazy. Super glad that we pulled this thing apart, because the first thing that we noticed when we got it apart was actually these ARP L19 head studs. There was 3 of them that were actually broken off in the cylinder head. The oil pump, so this also has a S2000 oil pump conversion. S2000 oil pump is, I think, one of the best Honda oil pumps. And you have these little billet adapters. This thing wasn't even tight when it was on it. It has all new timing components. It has a lot of good parts, but we just wanted to double check it. I had my buddy Steve up in Denver at Divulge Motorsports. I actually dropped it off. He pulled it apart, took it to his machine shop, kind of got it within his specs, and then I went up there, picked it up. So shout out to Steve at Divulge. I am super stoked to get this thing back in the Civic. It's gonna be a little crazy, so we might end up having to build a street car after this, because this thing is gonna be wild. Appreciate you guys watching this video. Let me know what you think. See you later.